So I'm here with Viki Forrest of the ANZA Technology Network. Viki and I have just come out of an absolutely wonderful lunch with Springboard Enterprises to launch their 2015 Springboard Entrepreneurs Program. It was such an energetic and exciting lunch, and we were very fortunate to have Viki talk to us about her role at ANZA and her career and how she sees startups scaling from Australia into the United States. Viki, tell me a little bit about your career with startups and what has brought you to this point in your career working at ANZA in the US.
So Gavin, I had a corporate start to life and dropped out into the startup world about 20 years ago. So I've had 20 years of startup life now, and that adjustment from corporate to startup was a big one, but honestly it took me about 2 months to decide it was absolutely where I needed to be. And now I work with startups from small countries, bringing them into the US, so really understanding the difference between doing business as a startup in a small market and being successful as a startup in a very large market like the US, and it is an absolute passion of mine. I love it.
What is it about startups that excites you?
The fact that there are startups says they're doing something innovative. They're doing something that's going to make a difference in the world. They're doing something that's risky with the potential of very high reward. The nature of the type of person who is attracted to that is a type of person who is a big thinker, typically a very passionate individual, and a person who has some ability to really shift how the world will be. That to me is exactly how I want to be spending my time.
It's interesting. That's exactly why we at Allens launched our Startups and Emerging Companies practice, because it's such fun and it's so interesting working with people with a different way of thinking, a very different way of thinking from the major corporate world.
Yeah.
The role of ANZA is obviously to assist emerging companies go from small markets into the US. Why is it that startups should in fact be thinking about doing that? Why not just stay in Australia?
There's nothing wrong with staying in Australia if building a $10 million business that makes a difference to the local economy and is very satisfying for an individual. But that is about the limits of this market. Australia is very small. So the reason, and almost always, for looking to the US is because that individual has much, much bigger ambitions. If you want to build a $1 billion company or a $100 million company, you need to be servicing a population of greater than 100 million. So you are, by virtue of that, driven to a larger market.
And what differences do you see between the startup community here in Australia and in the US? Do Australian companies start with a disadvantage, or are they well equipped?
So in terms of being well equipped in Australia, it's certainly we've got a world-class education system here. So, and that's the foundation, I think, of innovation. One of the foundations of innovation. So that's a big plus. Another one of the foundations of innovation becoming a commercial success is capital. And that is where there is a disadvantage. There really isn't a venture capital industry in Australia of significant size to be able to make a difference. And I think, you know, that's one of the hindrances to really successfully commercialising innovation in this country.
And when an Australian startup does move from Australia to the US, do they have to change their thinking?
Yes. in a word, they certainly do. I think there's some very significant differences in the way we do business in a small market versus the way we do business in a big market. Around the pace of business, much faster. in a big market. Messaging needs to be crisp, simple, compelling. Customers expect very results-oriented sales approach. Big markets require a lot of collaboration, which you don't find in a small market. There's a number of differences that the entrepreneur needs to adjust to, and I think being aware of them up front is a significant leg up to rapidly making progress. Finding it out the hard way is the slow way.
And how many Australian startups, just roughly, has the ANZA Technology Network helped move into the US?
Yeah, we've got pretty good figures on that. We have run many different types of programs and services over the 15 years that ANZA has been in business. Originally more of a showcase of Australian technology in the US, and in those days we worked with upwards of 400 companies over many years. We now run a much higher touch accelerator model where we work one-on-one with CEOs to help them for 6 to 12 months become very successful in the US, and we've worked with upwards of 70 companies in that model.
And if you were to pick a couple of your personal success stories from your own work through the program, which ones would you pick?
I worked with a woman who built a software management for a portfolio of buildings. So you think about building management being building of one. She worked to develop a platform for managing a portfolio of buildings, and she's been very successful in taking that to the US, winning some very large projects. Now, it took her some time to win those projects, but she's now getting tremendous traction there. I think another couple of great successes where we've had success in raising venture capital, a networking company out of Melbourne. We helped them raise $6 million out of a Boston firm, and that made a huge difference to the rate at which they could grow and succeed in the US market.
That's terrific. And lastly, reflecting on Springboard's own particular focus, which is to really help and foster women-led companies, is that something that you're seeing more of happening? Are there more women entrepreneurs in the technology startup space being successful at the moment?
So the emergence of Springboard in Australia has certainly exposed me to a lot more Australian women entrepreneurs, more than I ever saw in my years of doing business with entrepreneurs here. So they're bubbling up to the top through, thank you to Springboard. And so that's fantastic. In the US, at one stage back, I'm going to say 10 years ago, I worked for a non-profit organisation which was called the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, and that was a network of high net worth entrepreneurs in the Valley. So I actually have been surrounded by a lot of women entrepreneurs because of that. So I think I have an artificial exposure to a tremendous number of very, very successful women entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's terrific. Viki, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today, and we wish the Springboard program members for 2015 all the very, very best, and we hope Viki will in fact be taking some of those to the US at some stage in the future to help them raise capital and become a major success themselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin.